There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Exodus. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. So now with the Egyptian Planned Parenthood program, and now that it's a failure, Pharaoh had to come up with a new plan. And so he comes up with a simpler plan, and he just calls it murder. And so now all the baby boys are just to be thrown into the Nile River. And the Nile River was really considered to be sacred by the Egyptians. And they actually thought the Nile River was one of their gods. And so this is that river, and it provided abundant life for all of Egypt. And now this river has become death for all the Jewish baby boys. And you kind of think, well, how could parents do that? Well, I'm going to guess that probably many parents didn't do that, but then they would have their babies taken away and cast into the river anyways, because all the Egyptians were now spies, because it was all commanded by the Pharaoh. So they're being ratted out by their Egyptian neighbors. And it doesn't say how long this program went on, but we do know that Moses, he had an older brother, and his older brother Aaron was 3 years older than him. So we know that this program hadn't been going on for a long time. So it had to be a relatively new program. But we do know that the force behind all of this death was really Satan, because Satan, he has always hated the Jews, and he has always tried to destroy the Jews as a nation. And most of us, we know how this story ends. But had you ever thought this? How you see Pharaoh here, and you see him murdering all these baby boys by drowning them. But when we get to the end of Exodus, and we see Israel's deliverance, and that all those Egyptian boys, well, now they're all grown into Egyptian men, and they're all drowned into the sea when God cast them into the sea. So you ask yourself, is that just coincidence, or is that payback? I don't know. But now we go on to chapter 2, and we're told that both this husband and wife, that they are both descended from the tribe of Levi, and that they conceived and they had a son. And that probably was a sad day for them. And it doesn't tell us here, but we know that the husband's name is Amram and his wife's name is Jochebed. And this baby is their third child. And so they have this firstborn daughter named Miriam, and she's about 10 or 11 years old here. And then there's Aaron, who's just a toddler, and he's 3 years old. And now they have this little illegal newborn baby boy. And we never learn what this couple named this boy child, because Moses is never called by his Hebrew name. We only know him by his Egyptian name of Moses. And here, being of the tribe of Levi at this time, it really wasn't that special, because the last thing that we ever heard about Levi is that he was to be separated throughout all of Israel, along with his brother Simeon, because they were violent murderers. So at this time, Levi was not a tribe of priests, but they're just one tribe among a bunch of other tribes that are all slaves. But Jochebed, she knew that there was something different about this baby boy, because God had made this baby boy too beautiful. And so she knew that there had to be a purpose for him, and there was no way that she could destroy him. And there really had to be something really special about Moses' looks, because even Pharaoh's daughter, she must have thought he was beautiful, because she wanted that baby. And you wouldn't think of her really wanting some ugly Hebrew baby boy. Not that there's such a thing as an ugly baby. There's just some babies that are just more beautiful than other babies. So you can kind of imagine him about 3 months old and all that cuteness. And he's not one of those screaming, colicky babies at all.
And then you can kind of probably try to imagine hiding this baby for 3 months. And you're probably hoping that he doesn't cry too loud. And you're probably dressing him up like a girl, like maybe you're putting like a pink bow in his hair. And you're kind of just hoping that nobody will notice, because you have all these Egyptians who will be spying on you. And then you're going to have all these Hebrew neighbors who would be envious because they'd be grieving over their own lost sons. And so this couldn't be safe. And so this kind of always reminds me of like Nazi Germany, of how normal, regular, everyday citizens can go around and do these evil actions against people and do it as a nation. And so Jochebed, she defies the Pharaoh's edict, and this could have cost her life. But she does do what the Pharaoh commanded. She does follow the letter of the law. She does put her son into the Nile, but she just makes him a boat first, and then she puts him into the Nile. And that Hebrew word for basket here that Jochebed made, it's called an ark. And it's actually the same exact word as Noah's ark. And that's the only 2 places that word is used in the whole Bible. And now, because of her faith of God's plan for her son, she releases her son, hoping in God for the saving of her son's life. And she still has this faith, and it's in the midst of all her neighbors and all her neighbors who are suffering loss and grieving over their own sons, that somehow God will save her son. But to do this, she had to consistently and continually release her son into God's care. She could not hold on to him for her own purposes. She couldn't keep him, because if she did, she would have lost him, just like all the other mothers. And this is just a good place for us to remind ourselves that when God gives us something wonderful or something beautiful, like this child, that you have to release it back to the Lord for his purposes. That it's not given to you to hold on to with all your might. So you need to release it back to God. And there's times that we have to do this with our own children, but sometimes it's not just with children, but it's with anything we have. It can be like our marriages, or it definitely can be with our possessions. But everything we have, God has created for his own purposes. And it's not just for our good, but it's for his plans. And it can only be a blessing to us if we release it in obedience to him. And so now this next scene, I don't know what you picture in your mind, but I do not picture this like that beautiful scene from the movie The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I see this city as a bunch of oppressed people. It's a bunch of slaves that are living among a bunch of other oppressed people that are slaves. And they all have the same status called poverty. They have nothing. They're living in squalor. And so I picture this of looking like a refugee camp or maybe like a ghetto. So it's like this city of slaves. And I believe that this place was probably far enough away from the beautiful places in the city where the Pharaoh and all his family lived. I don't ever get the impression that they're all living right next door to each other. And so there you have this huge river, and that water was everything in Egypt because it gave life to everything. It's the water that everybody drinks from, and it's what they water all their crops with. And we're told later on in the Bible that this land is not like the land of Canaan, where the land of Canaan was watered by rain showers. But all the watering in Egypt was done by diverting the water from this river to irrigate their crops. So now, along with everything else at the river, now you have these children that are dead on the shore banks and from these babies that are being thrown into the river. And there's no way that Jochebed's going to do that. So she makes that waterproof basket. And I don't know, but I'm going to guess that her journey probably had to have started at night, because I don't think there's any way that she'd be able to carry around this 3-month-old baby boy during the daytime and not be seen by anyone, because he's too big to hide now. So he can't be hidden any longer. And so Jochebed, I believe, with her baby and her basket, along with her little girl Miriam, they go for a long walk down this riverbank at night in the darkness. So I'm going to imagine that they're going to have to walk for a while, because I don't think they would just be a quarter mile down the road, because I don't think Pharaoh's daughter lives next to the ghetto of slaves. And so now you got the three of them, and they're looking out for predators like crocodiles or snakes or tigers or wolves or whatever lurks at the riverbanks in Egypt at night. And so these people, they have no natural hope here. They never read this book. They don't know the ending of the story. They just had to live this out moment by moment. And so there can be no natural expectation that things are really going to turn out very well here. All they have is just a faith. They have a faith that God loves them and that he has a plan and that he will do something, though they have no idea what he will do or even what he can do. But it does seem that they did their research, because they knew where Pharaoh's household went to do their ritual bathing in the Nile. So Jochebed, she had already planned where she was going to leave the little ark with her baby in it. But here, Jochebed, she did not only have to just release the life of her little baby boy into the hands of the Lord, but she also had to release the life of her little daughter Miriam, because she had to leave her behind to watch him. So she left her at the water bank, and the basket was strategically placed into the reeds so that basket wouldn't float down the Nile River. And her little daughter, she was old enough to understand what was going on, that this was going to be to the risk of her own life, to look after her little baby brother in this desperate attempt to save his life. But you have to ask yourself, well, what choice do they have? So at some point before it's light, Jochebed had to leave and just let it be, that everything had already been offered to God in prayer and into God's hand. And it's all released with absolutely no promises to her from him. But Jochebed, what she'll experience and what she'll find out is that God had already gone before her. And that's the same way that God always goes before us in our impossible trials, where we have no hope. And that's because we serve the same God, where God is always faithful. When we walk in that little faith that we do have, where we know that he sees us, he'll take care of us no matter what else we see. And it doesn't really matter what we see, what's going on in everybody else's life around us, that he will save us. And I kind of wonder here, where here you can almost see that God has prepared Jochebed's heart for this trial by speaking to her through her circumstances, by her seeing that this is a very special child, a very beautiful child, and that God had a plan for him. But here I wonder, how did God prepare Pharaoh's daughter's heart to desire this child that wasn't her? And so I kind of wonder that maybe she wasn't able to conceive a child, or maybe she wasn't able to have a boy child, and that somehow that this had been going on for a long time in her own heart. Because we see that often happens with couples that can't have children, where they'll adopt children. And in many cases, after they've adopted a child, then they start to have their own children.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.